Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Next up, we are going to have a project talking about selective reality and an approach to augmenting reality with tone, and that is the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design, Denmark.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Simon.
And I'm Claudia, and together with Paula, Anna, Seriette, and Julian, we are representing CID, the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design.
And we are talking about selective reality. So this is an image that might be familiar to a lot of you. This is the kind of thing that you see very often when you look at design futures, forecasting, especially in the world of a billion sensors and augmented reality coming to the mainstream. This is the kind of a vision that we see most of the time. And we found, and especially there's quite a few surveys about this, that a majority of Americans actually think of this kind of future where so much information is layered onto the real world as a negative change. So only 37% of people think this could actually have potential for the better, and 53% think this kind of thing is a change for the worse. So this is something we want to address, and since we're already bombarded with so much information, we really tried to look into how we can make sense of all this data. So this is the problem in the world of a billion sensors, and there's so many things already fighting for attention that we're really losing the ability to focus on the things that matter to us. Therefore, we came up with selective reality as an approach to augmented reality that through selective sensory filtering. So that means we tried really to look into the most visceral senses, the most immediate sensors that we already possess as humans. So those are really, the 5 senses that everybody knows about. There's a few more out there that we have access to. But the important thing is that there is so much sensory overload in the world today, and this is only getting worse with so many sensors available to us and so much data, that we wanted to see whether there couldn't be a better approach to dealing with augmented reality in particular. So that means that instead of layering information on the world, as we are seeing, we would actually try to subtract information to try to get a greater sense of focus on the things that are important. So we started our experimentation with something that's called a sound walk. And if you're not familiar with this, this is a really fun exercise where you partner up and you blindfold your partner, and then you lead them around the streets in the environment. And in our case, that was the Copenhagen Harbor, which is a really nice place to do this, because there's so many sounds, so many details in the environment that you would never really pick up on unless if you actually remove your sense of vision. And this was a really powerful experiment for us and for a few people that we tried this with, because you don't really realize how many things you miss unless if you have some kind of thing removing some of the other distractions that are around you. So this was one of the main ways that we started getting inspiration for this approach.
In the next experiment about visual filtering, we used paper prototype to understand how this approach could feel like. So we made little holes on these masks that would allow the user just to perceive and see only one person at a time, so to be focused on just that person. And even if it's really a crude and simple experiment, that was already showing how our philosophy was going in the right direction. In the next experiment, we prepared a video sketch that would allow you to perceive and feel like and understand how it would feel like to have a visual auditory device made for selective filtering in a working environment.
Scenario where somebody will be browsing the archive of...
So can she access any video?
Yeah.
In the next and last experiment, we focus on audio. And here we let the person listen to the environmental sound in a way that the sound comes live processed, so that the user could listen to the environment and tune into specific sound. And we found out that this was a really powerful exercise, and that's why we decided to use our research to prepare a concept of a product that is called Tone. And Tone is a device that enables greater focus by selectively balancing auditory stimuli. And it comes in a shape of 2 earphones that you can plug in your ears. And while you put them in your ears, they keep the shape of your ear canal because it's made of a soft material. And Tone responds to gestures. So when you cup your ear, you can enable sound isolation, and this is, for example, useful when you are in a situation like in a crowded place and you want to focus on a conversation with a person that is in front of you. You can also enable noise reduction covering your ear, for example, as we have seen before, into the working environment, so to reduce the level of noise around you. And moreover, what tone can do is to enable environmental sonification, tapping on the other ear plug. And that means that it can allow you to perceive invisible phenomena, like, for example, if you are allergic to air pollen, you could just tapping on tone hear what is the amount of pollen in the air. And now we also created a short video to illustrate you how you might be using tone in your life.
He's a Swedish pianist, and it's kind of a dinner concert. So you.
So you can see there's some really fundamental applications here to the human condition, like the Wi-Fi. And of course, it's important to note that we realize this is a near future product, but it's really fascinating to think about that a lot of the technologies and the research that are required for this kind of thing to be a reality are already emerging today, such as in the field of psychoacoustics. And there's some really amazing technology in hearing aids already available today that would really lead us in this kind of direction. So I think what's important is that tone takes the concept, kind of the philosophical approach of selective reality, and takes it a bit further. And you've noticed it's adding a few things, but every time we add anything, like a sensor for Wi-Fi or pollen, we're also simultaneously taking something away. So for example, we're lowering the ambient noise to compensate, because if you just keep adding information and layers of data, you really risk dilution and having a sensory overload. So we believe it's very important, and there's so much potential in this world of a billion sensors for all this data to enrich us and to help our lives and our relationships and our work. But the problem is, if we don't process this data properly, if we don't find a good way to deal with it, then we'll be flooded with such an ocean of data that we will probably not have a great benefit from this great technological revolution. So that said, we believe it's our responsibilities as designers and researchers to make sure that this world of a billion sensors is not just another distraction, and this augmented reality, which is coming to the mainstream today, can actually be something that enables greater focus on the things that matter to us and the people that we love and the work that matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. It's like Bill wants to start us off.
So first, audio's sort of the next frontier in a sense. It's really neglected in action design. And it's too bad. So I really like that you focused there, and I like a lot of. I liked how you presented things, and there's an interesting thing here that I have. It's a question. It has to do with this notion about changing focus, because you have these gestures and you can focus in on this or that. And you showed it very nicely. It's like changing depth of field in photography, where you open up the aperture so you can really just get a clear. You did that visually with the first video where you had the audio and you blurred out the people at the same time you blurred out the sound. The question is, rapidly changing focus is fundamental to how we interact with the environment. And I want you to talk a little bit about the gestures that you would use. Does it scale? Because for a few things, using these gestures are easy. Once you get above 7, it becomes really complex. I'm curious if you've thought about that. You don't have to solve that. I'm just curious, really, when you were going through this, what your conversations were like around that space.
I think that's a great point, and we definitely envision this product not to be on all the time, but really people want to hear the environment most of the time, and there's only specific situations when you really want to focus down on particular things, like if you're working or if you're in a noisy environment and you want to have a conversation. So I think we don't envision this being used in kind of a rapid switching focus kind of scenario, and much more in a very specific situation where you might make an exception and actually block things out. Because, of course, we don't want to reduce our experience in the real world only in those particular situations when there's sensory overload.
Claudia and Simon, I want to congratulate you. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Please close your eyes. Take that in. Okay, you got that? Mm-hmm. You got it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. You guys did a phenomenal job. And I wanted you to close your eyes and take a moment of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was a very nice presentation. I agree, particularly with a lot of Bill's points, that I think there's some really interesting things you're going at. And you highlighted something that has been bothering me for a little while. So this is less of a question than an observation. But that we tend to be very good in design thinking around this, around the first order gestures and actions of triggering things, how to trigger the action. We tend not to spend as much time around the second order actions, the things that allow us to choose which filters we're going to activate and what sequence we're going to do them in. And that's a problem that is as big as the problem of managing my email filter boxes, right? I can spend my whole day just reorganizing the filters without actually answering any mail. We could spend a whole day figuring out the right sequence of gestures to apply the right filter when I put the hand up without actually affecting what we're doing. And I think what your presentation really highlighted for me is that as designers, we have to think through that whole sequence of actions from what is my intention right to making that intention real. And it's a bigger problem than it seems, and that we tend to often leave the problem on the engineers working on the sensors because we assume, well, the sensors will just know what's the right gesture. And when we leave that problem in engineering, that's a huge set of assumptions we're leaving on the table. And they're really meaty and they're really fun to dive into. So I'd encourage you to dive into those with this because I think you've got those first order ones down. Love to see what you come up with on the second order ones.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I believe we had Professor Ali Rose with that team here. Like trying to find.